Lakes Church of Christ. Good to be back in Wisconsin. We went down to Oklahoma for the Thanksgiving time, and I was just talking with Carrie about this morning and Silas in the back. I got to stop leaving Wisconsin when winter is so not bad. We went to California the weekend after it was 60 in the middle of November. I put up my Christmas lights and sunshine, and it was great. And we went to California, and it was all good. And of course, there cold is 60 degrees, and everyone's in sweaters and sweatpants, and I'm in a tank top. But we come back from California, and that night is freezing rain and ice. And the next day they're like, "Don't drive; it's so bad outside." I'm like, "Okay, well, this is a good reminder that I live in Wisconsin." So I drive to Oklahoma, and the day after we get there, we start hearing reports of foot of snow coming down this weekend, and we look at us driving back on Sunday goody. And we made it back, thank goodness. I am here, of course, but driving through Kansas and Missouri was rough. There was a lot of slowdowns, lots of folks who have not dealt with a whole bunch of snow before. And the most hilarious part of it was, as soon as we crossed from Missouri into Iowa, roads clear, much less cars. You could tell once you crossed into the area of, yeah, we deal with snow about every winter. So still a little difficult, but we come back to, I think Belleville got about 10.5 inches. I heard reports of a foot further north and things like that. But then, just last night it dropped a quarter of a foot on us in one night. And it's just Wisconsin. Every time we're leaving now, Wisconsin's just remember, you live where it's winter. All right, exactly. That's what I'm telling them now. I'm okay, no leaving whenever it's nice. I'm just going to tell my parents and in-laws, you come to us. I'm not leaving. I'm not crossing that border again. Because I keep bringing back the heavy, heavy snow and ice. But that's my weather rant for the morning. We are, big thanks to John Palmer for covering class last week. Right, that's right. I even got that email, right? I was looking at that and I went, whoa, if they're canceling things up north, then it is actually bad. So, okay, yes. Big thanks to you for being willing to cover class in lieu of my absence. But good to be back, and we will be continuing our study of Psalms, which we are now down to our last 3 lessons. Yes, 3 lessons. So this morning we'll be in chapter 143. 143, a quick little recap since it's been a couple weeks now. We last studied Psalm 140, which was entitled Deliver Me from Evil Men. We are back to, for I think the last couple Psalms now, to Psalms attributed to David in our little subtitles there, a Psalm of David. Last week it was to the chief musician, a Psalm of David, and this week it is a Psalm of David again. The study book made an interesting point that in Psalm 72, way back from when we are currently now, it says in Psalm 72, it actually says, the prayers of David, the son of Jesse, are ended now. And then we come back to Psalm, I believe the first one is Psalm 139, and it says, a Psalm of David. And it just goes to show that even oftentimes biblical historians and the collection, we know that Psalms isn't necessarily even in chronological order. And oftentimes we don't exactly know the author of each individual psalm, but we can kind of guesstimate a little bit based on the content and based on where the original inscription was found and things like that. But just a fun little aside of just halfway through Psalms, it says, okay, David's done writing Psalms, we're all done. Son of Jesse, not going to hear from him anymore. And then 100 chapters later, it says, oh, by the way, Psalm of David. And we're not necessarily guaranteeing this is a Psalm of David, but it feels like his writing style and his general content. So who knows? Might actually be of David, might not. But that was just a fun little. Even the study book was this is a bit odd. Why don't you think about that for a bit? Okay. So chapter 143, a Psalm of David. And the title of this study in the study book is "My Heart is Distressed," and you shall see that soon enough in our reading here. But let's just start off at first with the first 2 verses. Just if someone wants to read verses 1 and 2.
Hear my prayer, O Lord. Give ear to my supplications. Answer me in your faithfulness, in your righteousness. And do not enter into judgment with your servant. For in your sight no man living is righteous.
Okay. So right off the bat, we get the gist that yes, the author's heart is indeed distressed. Hear my prayer, O Lord, give ear to my supplications. In your faithfulness, answer me, and in your righteousness. That's a pretty cookie cutter standard kind of opening to the Psalms. Is listen to what I have to say. I have something to get off my chest. Answer me quickly, and all of those things. But there in verse 2, we see exactly kind of what the flavor of the psalm is. Do not enter into judgment with your servant, for in your sight no one living is righteousness. We always love to say all have fallen short of the glory of God, but here is a different way of saying it here in the psalm. For in your sight no one living is righteous. In all of our studies of the righteous person being lifted up, of how the righteous person's heart will never fail, how righteousness never ends, and yet here in this psalm we hear in verse 2 it has a very bleak sentence just upon first reading. Do not enter into judgment with your servant, for in your sight no one living is righteous. To have such a bleak outlook from the beginning, it kind of feels like, well, geez, where's this going? It's hard sometimes, and I think it's a good look into like the personal like anxieties of the author. Is for someone who is about to probably write about how they feel and how troubled they are, to start off from the beginning with so much as like no one in your eyes is righteous. It gives the sorrow of the author, but it also gives us a quick look into how the author views God. And in your eyes, no one living is righteous. Oftentimes, whenever you have doubts, whenever you have thoughts that are in the negative of just like something that's happening in your life, something that oftentimes, the question of like, why does God let bad things happen and things like this? When your outlook starts to become less of, God is above all and God is on like a different wavelength than us. This sentence here, for in your sight no one living is righteous, almost takes a hopeful stance of, God is not sorry, I'm blanking on words all of a sudden. God is not subject to our limited view of the world. That in this very dark sounding sentence, the author from the beginning lifts up God as, in your eyes, no one living is righteous. And we know that the goal of God was not to be this oppressive, controlling puppet master of the world, like you are all just living ants on this ball of dirt that I created, on a whim, on a day that I was bored. It is God wanting to have a relationship. And through this view of no one living is righteous, it's not necessarily trying to say that, everyone is doomed, this entire world is doomed, and everything is bad. It's more, the author knows he is speaking to someone who is so much on a higher plane that only God can hear what he's saying, can answer his question truly. The author knows they could go and talk to someone about what's on their mind, what's on their heart, and they might get some good advice, but the author is in such a place that he feels that only God can truly answer the questions that are on his mind. Yeah.
And when you think about it that way, there's a pretty strong connection between verses 1 and 2. And I didn't see that until you started talking about 1 verse 2, but, David was a king, and you don't just walk up to a king and start blabbering.
Right.
You need an appointment, you need to approach and get permission. And so sometimes I think it's easy for us to just assume God's going to listen, and we just start talking, but I think it's good to ask sometimes, like, please, I have something, please listen.
It is possible to take God's grace and compassion for granted. Even though it is limitless, even though it is always there for us, it is possible to take that for granted. And that you do have to approach God in the correct way. And not to get ahead of our studies here, but yeah, no, that is absolutely, the author recognizes, yeah, and that might be a good reason why it's attributed to David, is David was all about coming to God in the right way. Whether it's bringing the Ark of the Covenant back into the city in a loincloth and dancing for joy, or falling on his face before even the presence of a prophet coming to teach him a lesson. David always understood, even though he did make mistakes, the reason David was a man after God's own heart is because he got what his relationship was with God. And his understanding of that is why he is attributed so much grace despite his worldly mistakes. Any other thoughts before we move on? All right, so then moving on to our next section, a little longer here. If someone could just read verses 3 through 6.
When my spirit was overwhelmed within me, you knew my path in the way where I would walk. They have hidden the trap for me. Look to the right and see, for there is no one who regards me. There is no escape for me. No one cares for my soul. I cried out to you, O Lord. I said, you are my refuge, my portion in the land of the living. Give heed to my cry, for I am brought very low. Deliver me from my persecutors, for they are too strong for me.
Is that chapter 143?
142.
Oh, okay, we're in 143, sorry. I was looking there, I was like, I'm not crazy, right? Like mine isn't totally different. All good, no. But no, yeah, chapter 143, if you could read 3 through 6.
So that's 3 through 6, okay. For the enemy has persecuted my soul. He has crushed my life to the ground. He has made me dwell in dark places like those who have long been dead. Therefore my spirit is overwhelmed within me. My heart is appalled within me. I remember the days of old. I meditate on all your doings. I muse on the work of your hands. I stretch out my hands to you. My soul longs for you as a parched land.
All right, thank you. So, similar kind of vibe, similar kind of message is, in these couple chapters here, the author is beset. As is often pretty common, again, probably why we can attribute this psalm to David is there's a lot of psalms of David where he's talking about, I am constantly being harassed. The enemy has persecuted my soul. He has crushed my life into the ground. He has made me dwell in darkness like those who have been long dead. Here, the author likens himself to a body that's been buried 6 feet under, that he feels so unable to do anything, unable to make any progress in whatever it is he's doing, that he feels like I might as well already be dead. Like, cover me in dirt. Like I am so bound up by people trying to trip me up and cause me to do wrong that I might as well be dead. Therefore, my spirit is overwhelmed within me. My heart within me is distressed. There in verse 4, Patsy, what did your description say?
Therefore my spirit is overwhelmed within me. My heart is appalled.
My heart is appalled. Appalled is a $5 word there. Obviously, like, it has the meaning of, like, he's distressed, but, like, what is appalled, like, what degree to the extreme does appalled go to you? Disgusted. Like, appalled doesn't just give the idea of, like, oh, I don't like that. Appalled is, like, it takes you completely by surprise and flips you upside down. Like, I cannot imagine anybody doing this thing that has caused me to become appalled. Just like saying the word appalled, it feels like you have your mouth has to go appalled, like it caused you to. You are appalled. But yeah, so this is not just like, oh, this is annoying. Like if the imagery of being dead and buried in the ground wasn't like hard enough, just like my heart is appalled within me. I am like me, the person. You can see how I am distressed, but then my innermost organs are even like completely and totally disgusted. Yeah.
It brings to mind an image of something that completely dominates your point of view. It's not just something that distracts you. It really forces you to focus on something that disgusts you.
Yeah. The image of it that doesn't leave your mind for at least like a couple weeks. One of the, like I am blessed and cursed with a wonderful long-term memory, but the cursed part of that is the fact that I can remember every single embarrassing thing that I did in elementary school, middle school, high school, and I can't stop thinking about it. Every time I have something embarrassing happen, I think about, oh, I can't, that's just like whenever I went down the water slide too early and crashed into the person in front of me and they cried for like, and the parent yelled at me, oh my gosh, and just, yes, it's that image that won't leave your memory. It's something that happens that is so shocking, is so appalling, that it becomes almost a part of your worldview. It starts to like affect how you remember things, how you, going forward, how you approach that same situation again. And yeah, so my heart is appalled within me. I remember the days of old, I meditate on all your works, and here we see the author kind of starting to calm himself down. If we were just building up to like the peak of the author's anxiety and depression, here we start to see the author kind of almost trying to self-soothe, is kind of finding himself within his own writing. I remember the days of old, I meditate on all your works, I muse on the works of your hand, and I spread out my hands to you. My soul longs for you like a thirsty land, Selah. He just wants to punctuate that thought right there. I muse on the work of your hands, I spread out my hands to you. The same way, we kind of see this like peak and then coming back down, as we saw in verses 1 and 2. We saw like an extreme aggressive kind of point, and then it comes back down, and here we kind of see the opposite. We're kind of building up to this like, wait a minute. And part of I think, especially writing down thoughts and feelings, it's just as much a benefit for the author as it is for the people reading the work. You can see here that the author is finding peace in just writing down how they feel. Because within about 3 or 4 verses, we see that the author puts all our feelings out there and then immediately remembers, who is this that I'm speaking to? I'm speaking to God, the person who created the entire earth, me, my future descendants, my great-great-great-great-great-grandparents. And already the author there is turning from, I have so many enemies here on this world, but then remembering, you're the one who created this world. And it is him remembering things that have come before that the author is now starting to find comfort in. The works of God's hands. He muses on the work of your hands. He meditates on all your works. He remembers the days of old, that I am not the first person to have bad things happen to. Specifically, my people, the Israelites, have been going through a whole bunch of bad things up until this point. And they made it through just fine because I'm standing here today, the author thinks. And so here he spreads out his, the author says in verse 6, I spread out my hands to you, capital Y. My soul longs for you like a thirsty land. The author comes to the realization of what it is they need. And they need God. Y'all need Jesus is a common ism that we flippantly often say. We don't usually go to a crowd of people and just start yelling, y'all need Jesus, although it's not untrue. But here the author is coming to that conclusion of what I need is God. What I need is to open myself up. My soul longs for you like a thirsty land. I think Patsy here said parched land. That extreme thirst, that being completely devoid of moisture, bringing that idea of he's waiting to be filled. He's waiting for the rain to come. He's waiting for that first day after a long drought of just, you feel like the animals, the grass, the plants, everything just is completely and totally open to that rain. In the same way, the author here wants to be the same way, in such a way that every little bit that God can spare to give him, every little bit of comfort, every little bit of guidance, of faith that the author can take in, he wants to take in, because he knows that it's only through God that he finds this peace. That even though he is being attacked and tricked and crushed into the ground, made to dwell in darkness, like those who have long been dead, he knows that that is just the world trying to push him down. And that the only way that he can truly feel free of all that oppression, of all that persecution, is through God's guidance. And so he doesn't come to the conclusion like, oh, I can make it through this by myself. I just needed some time to think about it. The author says there, I spread out my hands to you. That idea of holding out your arms, that is, I just recently took a class on de-escalating aggressive situations in the medical workplace. And so, they taught us a little bit about like protecting yourself. And one of the big things are like kind of trains of thought is to make yourself as compact as possible and hard to hit or grab. And so how you do that is you compact yourself. You bring your arms in, you stand sideways so that there's less of you facing forward, and that kind of idea of defensive protection is to be as non-sticking out as possible, as few things to grab, as few things to hit. And here we see that the author is talking about spreading out their arms. This is a very unsafe position. You are almost, in two ways of looking at it, you are opening yourself up to all kinds of attack and things like this. This is not a way to keep yourself safe physically. And yet, we see here that the author is not worried about that. The author's not worried about physical attacks anymore. The author is talking about opening himself up spiritually. He opens his hands up to you, capital Y, to God. My soul longs for you like a thirsty land. He is just preparing himself in every possible way to be available, to be vulnerable, to be open to God's guidance and God's grace. Any other thoughts there? Yeah.
I was just thinking of the footnote for that Paul is desolate. So it could be either way, shocked or, desolate is like desperate,
Right.
so.
Yeah. Parched land, desolate land is not just something that naturally happens. It has to be desolate, to be parched, you have to be deprived of something. And yeah, to be in such a state, this is not someone who just has some self-conceived hard times that they're going through. They are going through actual hardships and are actually being, have a reason to be distressed. And yet even so, they are recognizing that the only cure for all of this is God. I've got a burning fever and the only cure is God. But yeah, so here we see that the author talking about enemies. Oftentimes we tend to think of just having enemies as this like awful, horrible thing, even though Jesus tells us like the world will hate you because of you. Like having opposition, having someone against us is just kind of a given. And the sooner that we can come to the conclusion that we don't necessarily need to be looking for who is the enemy, and rather focusing on who it is we need to be working with. Because we know that there will always be people out there trying to trip us up, trying to, speak against what it is we're trying to believe. But when we stop viewing them just as enemies and more so as people who are also going through hardships, people who have also been tricked, people who have also had falsity spoken to them, is where we start to find that comfort. Even though we are beset on all sides by different viewpoints and different people, we know that the evil is not the person themselves, but it is the evil in their hearts. That people who speak out against us have been tricked by Satan, have been fooled into thinking something that causes them to go against us. And whether or not it is our time, our job to try and change that person's viewpoint, the way that we approach them going against us can quite possibly even change their mind. If someone attacks you, the whole idea of turning the other cheek, if someone strikes you and you do not strike them back, that already is something that's like, that's not supposed to happen. That's not how people normally react. When, sometimes we see in movies when the bully is bullying someone and the person just kind of ignores them. That's not the cure for every bully, of course, but what does it do? You see the person who is being the aggressor is like visibly like shocked, is taken aback by the fact that not every person is just gonna lash out back, is not just gonna come back with more aggression. And I think the way that the author is trying to approach his enemies here is not necessarily like I have to strike back and kill my enemies, but he has to find a way to, if not change their point of view, to at least exist alongside. Is to know that God is the judge. That it's not the author's job to necessarily take up the sword and strike down those who oppose him, but protect themselves, of course, but to live their life in such a way that knowing that God will take care of it in the end. Any other thoughts before I move on? All right, moving on to I believe it's our last section here. Yes, our last little section here. If someone wants to read verses 7 through 12. Answer me speedily, O Lord, my spirit fails. Do not hide your face from me, lest I be like those who go down into the pit. Cause me to hear your loving kindness in the morning, for in you do I trust. Cause me to know the way in which I should walk, for I lift up my soul to you. Deliver me, O Lord, from my enemies, in you I take shelter. Teach me to do your will, for you are my God, your spirit is good. Lead me in the land of uprightness. Revive me, O Lord, for your name's sake. For your righteousness' sake, bring my soul out of trouble. In your mercy, cut off my enemies and destroy all those who afflict my soul, for I am your servant. So here in this section, we see this kind of back and forth that the author does. Answer me speedily, O Lord, my spirit fails. Do not hide your face from me, lest I go down into the pit. Cause me to hear your loving kindness in the morning, for in you do I trust. Cause me to know the way in which I should walk, for I lift up my soul to you. Here we kind of see, even though the author has just talked about his enemies and how he is oppressed and driven into the ground and all these things, his plan going forward is to be guided by God. He knows that even though, like David, very much of a lot of biblical figures had to go out and fight his battles a bunch of times. I mean, David and Goliath is such one story. When his son Absalom rebels, he has to go, and he plays a much less direct role in that. But you see David sometimes has to take action, and on God's behalf has to go and strike it. It has to go and defend himself, has to fight for what is right. But here we see in this psalm, David is asking not necessarily strengthen my arms so that I can strike down my enemies, give me the guidance to go and drive out my enemies from my land, but he's caused me to hear your loving kindness in the morning, for in you do I trust. Deliver me, O Lord, from my enemies, in you I take shelter. Revive me, O Lord, for your name's sake, and your righteousness' sake, bring my soul out of trouble. And we even see him ask the Lord to take care of his enemies. In your mercy, cut off my enemies and destroy all those who afflict my soul, for I am your servant. The author recognizes that it's not wrong to ask for the enemies to go away, but he doesn't ask to give him the strength to go and strike them down. He asks, get rid of my enemies for me, because only you are the one who can justly destroy the enemy. In all these verses, in what he asks for God to give him because the author wishes to have shelter, he asks for loving kindness, he asks for guidance, he asks for deliverance. In all of these things, the author again and again and again says, all of these things come from you, God. That no one else can give me what I truly ask for, which is the ability to live their life in the way that God commands. And he recognizes over and over that God is the only one who can give this, because I'll just take little snippets from here and there. In verse 8, for in you do I trust, for I lift up my soul to you. In verse 9, in you I take shelter. In verse 10, for you are my God, your spirit is good. In verse 11, for your righteousness' sake bring my soul out of trouble, for I am your servant. In everything that, in the conclusion of this chapter, the author wants it to be made very clear that God is the source. That whether it really is, if it really is David, the man who became king of Israel, who, even though he was chased by the previous king and dealt with all these different uprisings and other armies coming to try and take him over, is still, is part of the line of Jesus. King David is one of the more well-known biblical figures of this section of the Bible. And despite all these, fantastical stories that we often tell our Bible school kids about King David, David himself comes to us in a very vulnerable piece of writing that basically says, like, all these things that I've had, everything that I've accomplished is because of God, is because of his guidance, And even in those times where David messed up and made mistakes, he always came back around to God is the source. I messed up because I did not listen to God. I am in this bad position because I disobeyed God's commands, because I did not do what God tried to guide me towards. And in a lot of these chapters, we come to similar conclusions that the world will be our enemy, and enemies will, you'll go through hard times, but it's all about recognizing that God is what's most important, that if we have our faith, then nothing else can harm us. But here in this chapter here, I'm just especially struck of how the author recognizes that the enemies and the wickedness and the evil is not necessarily the people that are after him, the person that is causing him this distress. It is the lack of God. It is the lack of faith. It is a lack of vulnerability with God. Is that what has led to the author's anxieties and problems and these things that he's talking about in this verse now, is the fact that whoever it is that is causing him this distress isn't doing what God commanded, isn't following God's guidance. And David has seen more than we can nowadays, God's direct hand, God's direct guidance, the miracles, and of course, like all of the things with the Ark of the Covenant and things like that. David knew that God could reach down his hand and literally wipe his enemies off the face of the earth. But David also recognizes that that's not the point. That God is not some death laser beam that you can call down to zap everybody who you don't like or don't agree with. That God, part of our relationship with God is the fact that he wants us to be able to figure things out with his guidance and with his commands. We can find that, but all we have to do is go to God for guidance. And from there, we can find the solution that God wants truly, which is everyone to be with him in heaven. At the end, ultimately, the goal is for as many people to be a part of the church as possible. And that means having opposition, because that's just a given, because whether or not we like it, there's always, Satan is still working to try and fool people into doing the wrong thing. And that whenever people stop opening themselves up to God's guidance, that's whenever the devil sneaks in and starts with maybe a small thing, but then that turns into going down a completely wrong path into the gate of destruction, as Matthew says, or the book of Matthew says. But that in our hardships, in the times where we go to God talking about it just feels like everyone is against me, that I don't have any allies in this, that we have to remember that evil is the enemy. That bad people are doing bad things for a reason. Might not be the right reason, but it's not because they were born and instantly started hating everyone and started being mean to all the other kids. Something happens to make people bad. And as long as we keep in mind that the enemy that we fight is sin, that the true enemy that we have to look out for constantly is sin. Because sin is the only thing that can truly take a person away from God. Doesn't mean it's permanent, which is the blessing of it, is that forgiveness is always readily available to those who would turn away from sin. But we need to remember that sin is the enemy. Sinful people must be corrected and have to be shown love and compassion and mercy, but remembering that it is not that person who we have to strike down and push away and get out of our lives, it's sin. Yeah.
There was a comment that came in on YouTube just a few minutes ago, so it might have been something from a couple minutes back, but let me just read it,
Sure.
see what you think. It says, so in a couple verses in this last passage, it starts out, teach me, etc. Caleb's translation, he said, deliver me.
Oh.
Doesn't that give the passage a different meaning? So that's the question, and just looking at it, it looks like there's both in mind, like
Okay.
verse 9, deliver me, verse 10,
Maybe
teach
that's
me.
a cause me. Well, just-
So I guess
I
just
think-
I
asking,
think yours says cause.
Deliver me, O Lord, from my enemies. In you I take shelter. Teach me to do your will. Revive me. Oh, in verse 8, cause me to hear your loving kindness in the morning, for in you do I trust. Gotcha, yeah. So in that verse, in that context, you see verse 8 here. Cause me to hear your loving kindness. The
Mine says
translation.
let me.
Let
Verse
me.
10 says teach me
Verse 8. Oh, that's the wrong chapter. That's why that looks funny. This is verse 8. Let me hear your loving kindness. Yeah, the NASB says, let me hear. The translation here in the study book, yeah, is cause me to hear your loving kindness. What were the other ones? Teach me to. Gotcha, yeah. So, yeah, interesting point. Yeah, teach and cause. Cause me to hear your loving kindness. I think in this translation is not necessarily fully different, but cause me to hear your loving kindness. It still feels instructive, but in more of like a direct kind of like grab you by the ear, kind of like, hey, listen to what I have to say. But yeah, and I think that's the importance and kind of the crux of different translations is how the words translate. But it does cause a bit of almost a different spirit of the message of the verse. But yeah,
I think teach and deliver can really mean the same thing. Right? Teach me the way, deliver me in the way,
Yeah.
kind of guide me.
yeah,
Both mean almost the same thing. So the thrust of it is the same.
exactly. Yeah, no, I think it might come off a different way, but yeah, the meaning I think is essentially the same. Yeah.
Yeah, because if you're truly taught the right way, you're gonna go the right direction. I mean, that's what we do with our kids and, we try to influence them to go the right way.
Right. Deliverance, even in the context of like, God deliver me out of this situation, God doesn't literally reach down his fingers, pick you up and put you in a not bad position. He shows the way that you are to get out of that position. And I think, yeah, the message of this chapter here is, yeah, deliverance does not come from a literal hand pushing you in the right direction. It comes from, yeah, teaching you the right way to go, which is in itself, if you're taught to go the right way, is a deliverance. Yeah.
I think the let me hear is a little bit different in that some people can't hear the word of God, can't understand it. And so I think this also allows the author to say, please allow me to be a part of those that can hear you,
Right.
can understand.
Thinking of the story of David and Bathsheba, David could not understand the wrong he had done, even though the prophet Nathaniel came to him and told him the story of the rich man and his sheep. He's telling this whole story, and David still doesn't get it. He's in the process of basically saying, hey, remember that thing that you did? I'm putting it in a different, structure, but it's the exact same thing that you did. David couldn't understand. He couldn't know what he had done was wrong until Nathaniel finally goes, think about the story, and David goes, oh, that's so bad. Why would the person do that? And Nathaniel goes, dude, you did that. That's what you did. And so sometimes it does take, when we ask for understanding, when we ask for teaching from God, it's not always just like a eureka, I understand it now, I magically get it. It takes sometimes someone else to come to you and say, hey, have you thought about what this says? Have you thought about what the Bible said about that? Have you thought about what you're doing might not be the right way to go? And so, yeah, letting them hear the Lord's instruction is, God is not physically restraining us from understanding, but part of that plea, part of that cry is to, if I am in such a way that I'm not understanding the wrong that I do, let someone come and correct me. He prays for So in this whole way, we're coming to the same conclusion, but in the way that it's carried out, that's a really cool kind of snapshot of how translations can not always, come to a different idea, but kind of make you think about it in a different way. We were just talking about, me and my wife were talking about something about college and understanding and how we view the world growing up in, elementary, middle, and high school. We were talking about, you're taught things, you're supposed to repeat knowledge, you learn facts, and you kind of think about, how do you feel about this, especially in English class. They were always asking us, what did this story mean to you? How did you think about this story? And once you get into college, that kind of turns on its head. You're taught more facts and knowledge and things, but also in college, at least personally, I was challenged to think about the world in how do other people view this? In my Bible classes, in my music classes, especially, I remember kind of having these moments of how would someone else read this? And in the same way, how do the different translations cause you to think about a verse in a different way? You still you kind of get the gist of what the verse is trying to say, but then the visual language and how you kind of think about how it says it is, very interesting. And just one word can have us approaching a verse in so many different ways. So that's time for us. Any other last thoughts before we wrap up? All right. Well, thank you for a wonderful discussion for class. Next week, our second to last study will be in chapter 146. So if you want to be reading ahead, chapter 146 will be our second to last chapter there. And that's it for class. Thank you all so much.